Hey there everyone, my name's Andrew and this is Canadian Starships. Let's see what's on the bench this week. This week on the bench, we've got some progress to show you. During the time between updates, I was able to get all the windows done on the secondary hull of the second Enterprise E on the bench. So I went ahead and got the second secondary hull. That's a lot of seconds. I got it all caught up to the point that the first one was at the end of last week's update. So we're going to move on from there. I will show you that, but it's a lot of rinse and repeat, just exactly the same work that was done in the previous update. So we're going to move on to getting the secondary hull lighted. So that's going to include all of the nacelle lighting assembly installation, the lights inside for the windows, and all of the nav lights for the secondary hull. So that is our goal, to get both secondary hulls lighted and ready to go that way. Then after that, we're going to have a lot of seam work to do on it. But I want to get those parts installed, all the lighting installed, and we should have something really cool to see by the end of the update. So let's get right at it.
But before we get started, why not take a moment and click the subscribe button. And while you're here, click on that notification bell so you don't miss a single video.
So here's a look at the two Enterprise E's brought up to the same point in the workflow. Now, I spent most of last week just working on getting the secondary hull windows done and getting everything caught up. So it's nice to have both ships to the same point. And now we are going to start working on getting the warp nacelles built and installed. We're also going to get this interior lighting done in here and all the various flashers and blinkers that are required on this ship. So we're going to work on them side by side, getting each component done on both ships before we move on. So the first step in getting the nacelles ready to go is getting the Bussard collector lenses in place. So for one of the ships, I've got the Bussard collector lenses, and you can see how nicely frosted those are. Now, this is going to be done in a couple different stages. First of all, the Bussard lenses themselves have been frosted with some Rust-Oleum frosted glass. This has taken about 3 coats, with allowing it to dry in between coats. Now, one of the things with diffusion for light is that the more layers you have with space in between, the better diffused your light is going to be. So what I will do is add some frosted lighting gels. I think this is a Roscoe 103 frost. But what I will do is take one of the lenses. This is just a spare one that I've got, and I will trace out the shape of the lens, and then what I will do is adhere that to the back of the lens. So you can see on this piece that it is flat on the back rather than contoured like these pieces are. That's because I've already got the frosted lighting gel in between there. And so there's an air gap in between. So the first layer here will diffuse some of the light, and then there's a space for the light to travel through, and then it hits the frosting on the lens and gets diffused again, and that just helps to eliminate hot spots. We're going to be doing something fairly similar on the warp chiller grills with different levels of light diffusion. So I'm going to get this traced on here, cut out, and then I'm going to attach it to the lenses with microcrystal clear. I'm going to use microcrystal clear as well to attach the parts to the nacelles. That way we don't craze any of that clear plastic and ruin that nice exterior look on here. So just a quick stop here to show you that I've got the pieces of diffusion material cut out, and those are just going to be microcrystal cleared right on top of the lenses to give that double layer diffusion. Moving on to doing work for the nacelles, getting these things ready to install, and what I'm going to do is install just half of the nacelles to the pylons like this, the inboard side. That way I can do all the lighting before I put the second half on. Now, before I install this, I do still need to drill the holes for the nav lights in the back of the nacelles. The one up front here is in a separate piece, so that's not an issue, but I can't do that once it's glued together, otherwise I have no room to get wiring through, so I have to do it while it's still unattached. So drilling a hole in a seam while it's still not glued together is very tricky, so that's going to be rubber band together very tightly. The other thing I'm doing in preparation is this piece here. Now, it's the location pin, it's a location strip for the nacelle to be attached properly to the pylon. However, it's quite tall inside there, and that's going to be an uneven surface to mount lighting to inside. So I'm just going to scrape that down a bit with my number 11 blade, just like this, until it's a little bit closer to the height of the inside of the plastic. I'll still be able to locate this, no problem, but it'll create a bit of a smoother, flatter surface for the lighting to be mounted to in here. That'll just make everything easier to work on. So that's what I'm going to do, and get that done before we actually install these pieces. While I was getting some work done on the nacelles, I was talking with Danny, the programmer, and well, he convinced me to try something. And this is something that I was not going to do because of the amount of space that was in the part, and didn't really think it would turn out too well, but he insisted that it would kind of not be good if I left this effect out. So what I've done is we've added a quantum torpedo firing effect. Now, this lighting effect that you're seeing right now is just the strobe flasher circuit for testing purposes, but we have got a photon torpedo, quantum torpedo launcher lighting effect working. And now, because I've done this after I installed the deflector dish, I've had to open this up and dig in there and put the LED all the way in there. So considering the work I had to do to get this installed and working, I think it's turned out fairly well. And of course, we're going to have to set this up on the other one too. So I'll spend a little bit of time and get that one connected and dug in the same way as this one is. But yeah, it could be a cool little effect. Want to show you a couple things handheld here. Here is that first secondary hull with a close-up look of the LED that's been installed into the photon/quantum torpedo launcher, and I've actually got the second one lighted up as well. Now, there's no paint on the part there like there is on the other one because it came off of the what would have been the static build. So that is looking pretty good. If I just move the camera in around this way, you can actually see, let me get it in there. You can see just how that's been done. So that test is going quite well. I've also got some other LEDs ready to go here. Now these are going to look completely crazy here because it looks like it's just shining light all over the place. There's no paint on these parts. This is just the light installed into these parts, so the entire part in that area is going to glow. These are 0402 SMDs inserted through the bottom, and they're actually reassessed quite a bit in there because I plan on adding some fiber to these, just like I will probably with most of the navs on this particular kit. But the fiber will only go in to where the LED or the SMD is, which is fairly close to the surface. And I'm doing it this way this time instead of using a resin to create a lens, so that I have better control over the lighting aperture with painting. So that's one thing that I'm doing different from the last time I did this kit. There's not going to be a ton of fiber, only a few millimeters probably in there when all said and done, but that should help create a bit of a nicer looking aperture on the surface because I can keep it longer than the surface for painting and then cut it off and it's nice and clean there. I don't have to worry about trying to mask such a tiny spot. So that's some of the progress I've got going on right now, and that's just testing away there, and these are doing some tests. And those, if you're not sure what these are, these go into the front of the nacelles, and that's where the constant on light is going to be at the front, just on top and behind the Bussard collectors. So that's where that goes, and these are separate parts. Makes it a lot easier to install lights when you can put that into a completed part. It's really going to be difficult putting the lights into those half parts there before they get assembled. Nice little bit of progress to show you here. Each pylon has half of a nacelle attached to it now. Obviously half because we have to put the LEDs inside. Now, I've chosen to put the inboard piece on first so that I can work on it from the outboard side. The inboard just meaning the part that is on the inside of the ship. It's much easier to work when you've got all this extra space here than it is if you're trying to work in between the two nacelles. So we're going to get the Bussard lighting, the chiller grills, the two flashers top and bottom at the back here, and the constant on the front. The constant on is inside these little pieces. They just attach right up here. And the flashers at the back are going to be the most troublesome LEDs to get in because I have to mount them in here on half of the nacelle, line them up properly, and make sure that I can put the other half on with the LED installed. So that's going to be a bit tricky. Actually, all of the work on these nacelles is fiddly work and it's taking some time. That's why there was no update last week, because this takes quite a bit of time. So I'm going to get right... Oh, I also want to show you that I got the Bussard collector masked off here. I chose this time to take the time to create one piece cut exactly to the size of masking tape to cover the entire lens instead of piecing it together from smaller parts. Just eliminates the risk of any paint getting in between the seams of the various different pieces of tape. It takes more time, but I think we'll be much happier with the results on that. So I'm going to get started working on lighting up these nacelles. Now, the wiring on these Bussard collectors is fairly delicate, and I could not get isolation into every single pin just because of space restrictions in there. So what I discovered as I was working with these is that if you manhandle them too much, some of the exposed wires can come unsoldered, and that's just due to the delicate nature of them. So what I've done is I've gone in, I've put this piece of shrink tube here, and I've backfilled it with epoxy after I tested to make sure everything was functioning properly and well secured from a soldering standpoint. I tested it, I backfilled it with the epoxy, let it fully cure, and it now functions really well, and the epoxy just gives it that extra bit of stability and security so that as I'm moving it and maneuvering it to get it into the nacelles, that they will not move at the connection points, which means we won't have any breakages of the circuits. So that just gives it a little bit of extra added security while manhandling it. Once it's installed into the ship itself, there's nowhere for it to go. But this just gives it that much needed stability during the process. So I've tested this, it works, it is fully functional. I can now move ahead and do the other three since this is something new that I'm doing on this particular type of part. So I wanted to make sure I tested it on one because it's a lot easier to remake one cluster than it is to remake all four if I just gone ahead, done it, and it didn't work. So I'm ready to work on the other three. With all of the Bussard collectors backfilled with epoxy, they are all installed. So both ships have both sets of Bussard collectors installed. So next I'm going to work on getting the lighting ready for the chiller grills. I've been working on the chiller grill LEDs, and I've got these all wired up, and I've even got some of them with the diffusion over the top because multiple levels of diffusion really do a good job. However, I forgot about this. There really is not enough space in here, especially near the back, for these 50/50 LEDs strips to fit in the two pieces without the back section getting crammed all the way up near the clear piece that goes over the top, and that's no good for diffusion. So we need to make an alteration. We are going to go with the 2020s. Now, this is what I like to use for the phaser rays because they're higher, basically higher resolution than these ones are for phasers, especially on the smaller kits like the Enterprise E. But I'm going to need to use these for the chiller grills simply because of space issues. These are incredibly small parts to fit lighting in, especially in this section here. So I've counted it out. We're going to need 35 because these are broken up into 5 LED sections. 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35. So this is the length that we're going to need. I'll just adjust the programming to accommodate 35 LEDs instead of, I think, like the 17 that we have here, something like that. And we will be able to mount these, hopefully, just on one side of the engine part. And then we'll be able to wire everything in together. So that's going to be my next step. The Chiller Grill LED strip is temporarily affixed into the outboard half of the nacelle using some hot melt glue. Now, I will only ever use hot melt glue from a glue gun to temporarily fix anything because it's not good enough to do things permanently. So it's temporarily attached in there. The Bussards are permanently attached, and I've got all the wires running out the back. So I've got the Chiller Grill LEDs and the Bussards hooked up to the breadboard. Let's give this some power and see just how this is going to look. There we go. The Arduino is plugged in and we have some light. I'm amazed just how good these Bussards look, even though they are covered with the yellow masking tape for the painting purposes. Keep in mind, there's absolutely no diffusion installed in the Chiller Grill yet. The Chiller Grill piece itself hasn't been sanded down and frosted at all. No diffusion inside. And this is just the very raw lighting effect. So it's looking pretty good. I think that we can get the rest of these wired up, get them doing their test, and then we should be able to install them in. With the Chiller Grill lights installed, all we have left to do are the flashers. Those are already wired up and tested, so we should be good to go on those. Every LED is now installed into the starboard nacelle of this one Enterprise E. So what we've got is on the piece that has to go on, we have the LEDs for the Chiller Grills installed in there. And then on the inboard piece, which is already on the pylon, I went ahead and installed the flasher navs. These are the most annoying LEDs to install because it's really difficult installing it on half of a hole that's been drilled because the other half is on this part. So you have to actually kind of like get it to go on there without the other half of the part to mount it to. Really challenging. So we've got the Bussards, the constant on. Now what I have to do in order to close all this up is consolidate and connect all of the wiring together. So the first thing I'm going to need to do, and I don't know if you can see, this wiring underneath is coming out the bottom of the ship. I can just take it off the stand here and show you how it's coming out the bottom there. That panel, along with the neck panel, will be the last panels that go on, so I've always got access during construction to those wiring hubs. So the sides have to be connected. So port and starboard nacelle wires have to be connected to each other and then connected to the main wire running down the post, which will mean that these coming out of the pylons will then be live if they were attached to the Arduino. Then I've got to get the all the wiring for the Bussards, the Chiller Grills, the flashers, and the nav all tied into the appropriate lines. And that's going to be a little bit tricky just because I've got this half part here that I've got to kind of support while I do that, get it all wired up, and then put it together. So that's going to be my next job, get that done. And honestly, I was hoping to get all 4 nacelles done in this update, but I think we're going to just have to be happy with one completed nacelle to show off at the end of the update. A quick handheld update here. It's been a little tricky, but all of the lighting is functioning now. The Chiller Grill LEDs are a bit of a power hog when they surge up. So what I've been able to do is put the ground for the flashers on the ground for everything else in here. And I have given the cable, the black cable that was going to be the ground for the flashers, is now connected to the red there. And that is going to be giving us, if you follow this wire over to the other Arduino, that's just a quick way I've given it its own power source split out from the original power supply. So it's getting a direct feed of power from the power supply rather than sharing what's going through the Arduino there. And the reason for that was because the light up here was really dimming down a ton every time that this surged. It's still going just slightly, but given that this is only going to surge when it goes to warp, a very slight dim on that is not too much of a problem. Flashers are working in the back. Bussards are bussarding there in the front. The chiller grills are going strong. And what I need to do now is pack this wiring inside. Some of it's already been epoxied in place. The rest of it has to be battened down so that I can get this half of the nacelle attached. So I'm going to try to do that as efficiently and quickly as I can, because I am quickly running out of time to get this update out. It's definitely not out on time. At least maybe I can get it out a day late, but I think it's worth it to get this functioning. And of course, the first one you do is always going to take the longest. Like the first nacelle on a project is going to take longer than the second nacelle on a project, because the way that you're doing it on a particular build, you're sussing out all of the issues. The first one, the second one will go a lot faster. Now, while it's still being held together with an elastic band and the diffusion is only temporarily set in there, and while nothing's holding the front together, everything works and it looks pretty good. We might have to just tweak some of the lighting effects in the programming, but I'm thinking that it is starting to really look good. We've got our flashers happening in the back. The Bussards are going the way they should up front. And we have the chiller grills going. So I'm quite happy that we have one functioning, if not quite fully assembled, nacelle ready to go.
And as I was getting the picture for the thumbnail for this video, I was amazed at how good it looked with the black background. So here's a little bit of a video of it up against that black background so you can see just how nice the lighting looks. And that's going to wrap things up for this week's update. Well, really 2 weeks worth of update on the bench this week. Not quite as much done as I really hoped. I had hoped that all 4 nacelles on both ships would be buttoned up, closed up, all good to go. But we did get one fully wired with it kind of closed. But that's kind of the way it goes sometimes. Doing the wiring work in those nacelles is very tedious and sometimes frustrating work. There are not very many nacelles on these models that are smaller diameter-wise than the Enterprise E at 1400 scale. And what makes it worse to work with is that it's split side to side. If only Round 2 or AMT at the time would have developed this where it separated top and bottom, it would have made building the thing so much easier. But you have to work on the side. You have to kind of tape things in or glue gun things in temporarily so you can epoxy the wires in place, and the wire management is just a mess in that kind of a space. But we got through it on that one, so I'm going to be able to tell you right now there's not likely to be an update next week, because I'm going to be taking this whole week just to get those other 3 nacelles wired up, get the wire management done, because that just takes so much time. So no video next week unless there is a specific component about doing these nacelles that you want more information about. I am very happy to put out a video that looks at specific issues that you want more detail about. So if there's anything in that process, the Bussards, the chillers, the flashers, wiring it up, wire management, anything like that that you want more detail on, leave a comment down below. And if it's there within the next couple days, I should be able to get some video clips put together detailing those specific things. And now if only one person leaves a comment about that, I'm not going to put out a video just about the one. But if there's a few different comments about a few different things that you want a little bit more detail, I've got 3 more nacelles I'm putting together. So I've got lots of opportunity to show you as I'm doing it. So if that's of interest to you, if there's a specific question you have, leave it in the comments and I will try to put something together that will answer those questions or give you more detail on it. But that's going to be it for this week. I hope that you have enjoyed this illuminated update. If you did, make sure you hit that like button. If you're new to my channel or you haven't done so yet, why not hit that subscribe button today? You'll make me very happy if you do. But for now, my name is Andrew and this is Canadian Starships. Have a great day, everyone.